Welcome to another episode of the Shots from the Winchester podcast by Greencastle. We're here with my brother from another mother, my main man, JT Frank, founder of consequenceofhabit.org, host of the Consequence of Habit podcast, and the guy I started doing podcasting with 6 years ago, something like that.
It's been a while, man.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Anyway, we always start off with a shot here on the Shots from the Winchester podcast, but you quit drinking about 3 years ago. Almost four.
4 years in February.
So let's. I'm drinking a pineapple cider, Austin's East Ciders, and you're drinking
Athletic Brewing, one of our biggest, for Consequence of Habit, one of our biggest supporters. So
yeah, right on. Cheers. You are now running consequenceofhabit.org, and you're using Consequence of Habit podcast as a mechanism for getting exposure and talking about Consequence of Habit itself. The name, the brand that you built. What does Consequence of Habit mean? Why did you name it?
Well, that goes back a little bit to even when we're doing our shot here, right?
Yeah.
So, not to get too deep on it, but there was a reason I decided that alcohol and I should probably part ways. It happened actually at a pinnacle time too, because it was when we had just started comedy, right? So to start doing something where you're in front of a lot of people, where traditionally I would have used something to maybe get rid of some of those nerves. It was a strange time to make that decision. But I just started looking at my own life. I said, hey, I got all these things I do on a daily basis. Some of them are adding value to my life. Some are compromising me in a lot of ways that I'm not super happy with. So I made this one change in my life. Just got
Cutting out drinking.
For me, it was alcohol, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm always careful to say it because that was just my vice, right? Everybody may have their thing. For me, that just happened to be alcohol. So I made this one change, and my life just got simpler. I'm going to say, it got better because it got simpler. Some of the things that I used to look back at and go, hey, I'm not super happy with this thing. Well, those went away. So I became fast.
What's an example of one of those?
All right. For me, it was if I were going to have a glass of wine or two with my dinner, and then I'm going to drive somewhere, right? Or, I wasn't what somebody would call, like, we grew up thinking about what somebody who had a problem with drinking looked like, or what that looked like. That wasn't my story. My story was I partake in it on a fairly regular basis, but you never saw me slurred. You never saw me. I remember, we're going to get deep on this quick, but I remember my kids saying, like, we were in class and they were talking about, favorite foods and drinks. It's like, hey, my dad's favorite drink is beer. And it's
You said
funny.
that?
Huh?
You said that?
He said it.
Oh,
which if I said it, it's fine.
Yes.
But when your kid says it, you're like, oh, and everyone could giggle and you go, and then you're like, that's not.
I need to hide that.
Yeah, that's not as funny as. Yeah, right. I'm like, I thought those bottles were all hidden. So I just made that change in my life, and then I became fascinated with, like, all right, what is it we do on a regular basis that makes it? How does it make us feel? This idea of being accountable to ourselves, doing things that make you feel good about yourself, your habits. They build real self-esteem, not this facade. And I actually mentioned you in a story quite a bit. I was, you were in the front of we were teaching a class together.
Yeah.
You probably know the story. You were in the front of the classroom, and you may not even, you were giving a brief on something. And you asked me to come from the, hey, you know something about this. And you said, come on up. And I was walking from the back of a classroom to the front, and, like, I felt like the walls coming on me. And I never had an anxiety attack my entire life.
Mm-mm.
And I turned around and I went to go talk, and, like, words weren't coming out of my mouth. I just kept, like, clearing my throat. I'm like, what? So I ended up just walking away, like, as if I just had something in my throat. And that, to me, was the first sign, like, I had something maybe going on. I wasn't, like, I had to try and figure it out. And that started a process of kind of self-exploration and looking at how to, what is this idea of what everyone else thinks about us, like something we put out there, and then what is the idea of, like, at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep, the real, how you really feel, and then these differences between the two.
And what is the consequence of our habits,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And our habits create conditions that we have to live in.
The real conditions, not right. We can put stuff out in on social media. We can put stuff out to coworkers and family members, but at the end of the day, you're the person that has to. So I get to is I think in that moment from walking in the back of the classroom up front, I felt like that facade had dropped, right? Like everyone could actually see the real thing,
Yeah.
not this thing I put out there. And I said, man, I gotta.
Did I do anything to help and
No,
point out
yeah,
that, like, I was like, everybody, look at this guy.
Yeah,
He
look at
just
him.
turned and ran.
You're so nervous.
Yeah. Oh, what a pussy.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that was one of the things I guess maybe started that process, which was weird getting back to the comedy because I could still. It was a different feeling because comedy for me was always a coping mechanism. I think you and I have had that conversation too. That was one way I could always.
Make sense of the world.
I could make sense of the world. I could always get positive feedback. It became, as much as I loved it, almost like a crutch. Whenever I was in a difficult moment, I could always just make people laugh, right?
Yeah. And it's a little bit of a drug.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you feel that the same way, but
yeah,
I have, you forgive me if I'm hijacking it, but we've talked about when you go out, and you and I have said, like, we've worn a hole in the carpet behind the curtain, like just waiting to go out, and like my fingers are tingling and I can't catch my breath, and I have no idea what I'm going to go out and do, even though I know my material. If you'd ask me in that moment, what are you going to go out and do? I have no idea. When I break through the curtain, when they go, okay, next up is John, and you break through that curtain, that is a moment where you take that breath and you step through, and even at that moment, I probably couldn't tell you what I'm going to do, and I get up to the mic, and it's like a switch where I just start to do it, and I just start to deliver my material, and I'm tying it back to what you brought up. This is where a little bit of the drug happens. When you get that first laugh, oh man, all the nerves, all of that hard work, all of that rehearsal and fine tuning your jokes. When you get that first laugh and you know that you've made an emotional and a social connection with an audience member or with multiple members, if you just get one laugh from one person, you have made a connection. Man, that's hard to replicate as a drug, like as a feeling.
No, I remember you and I walking off, and then I would even that night I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
Like I was on such a high from it. Yeah, it's unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But that's what I think. Because we're so nervous, we were so far out of. Because there's one thing about making friends laugh. It is another animal. So you meet a lot of funny people, and they say, "Oh, people said I should try stand up," and you should. But if you think that because you're funny at work, that you're going to be funny on stage, they don't always translate. And I think that's what. So that risk versus reward, that risk of going out there, that feeling of like, dude, I don't know if I can do this, to walking out there and then getting that positive feedback, that feds. I mean, it's very hard to even put into words how amazing that feeling is. So
yeah, and sort of bring it back full circle. When you started Consequence of Habit podcast, so feeding off of that high, that would be a habit. If you are if you're an addictive personality, that's some people would say, well, that's, you got to be careful of that because now you're feeding on an addiction. But yet you, if I understand correctly, you're like, hey, it's okay to look at some habits because not all habits are negative, right? Some habits are positive. I don't know.
Well, it is. It's a double-edged sword, and that's what we're trying to point out is that
with Consequence of Habit.
Yeah, just when we analyze things, we look at what we do, our own habits. There's ones that are great, right? And then there's a lot of habits. For a lot of us, it's a subconscious thing, and for me, it still can be. It can be. What do I do? Like we all do things when we're uncomfortable, and sometimes those are subconscious things. If you said, "Hey, when I'm uncomfortable, I look at my phone more."
Yeah. I weep openly.
Right. Well, that was healthy.
It's an outlet.
I've seen it's so ugly. Your face is so ugly.
I'm an ugly crier.
That's ridiculous.
My mascara runs. It's you guys know what I'm talking about. The audience knows. They know.
So it's just looking at those things and maybe understanding the emotion behind an action, and then maybe that the actions that we do because of the way we feel, right? So
So what's the mission of Consequence of Habit then? Is to bring light to our habits, or
it's to bring awareness to our mission statement is to bring awareness to the impact that habits have on our mental health, success, and the environment. So we have an environmental side. Not all of it, but a lot of it is we do a lot of work with the veteran and first responder community, because these are communities that they've picked up amazing habits in the military. They're doing, getting up early, working out, but at the same time, there's habits that not all of them, but people have picked up that aren't serving them long term. We talk a lot about identity. You're involved in something, and when you're no longer part of that organization, that group, there's a lot of people that lose that identity, and maybe they lean on some of those habits that
to replace that. Are you replacing that feeling?
I think so. You talk to a lot of people, say like, hey, they call it choir practice. They went out and drank with other service members, and it was a camaraderie. It was a way of building, and it was healthy. It's probably healthier than now you're out on your own, and you still have this coping mechanism. Yeah.
And you actually join a choir sometimes and go and drink, and it just doesn't.
It's between the two.
It's not a healthy thing.
Yeah. So we're doing workshops. We're doing different things on that, maybe to show people alternative ways to deal with stress and trauma that don't include either self-medicating, risky behavior, just different things. So
you have taken this on. You still have a 9 to 5.
I do.
And you've taken on this, and it's shifting gears a little bit, but I think it's kind of a cool part of your story, taking on this mission. You created a nonprofit. You're running a podcast that has, you guys are 100 and something episodes?
We're about 105 in right now.
105 episodes. So, I mean, that's a lot of time and effort to find guests and manage the website and everything like that. Talk a little about what drives you to run that side hustle that is not much of a side hustle. It's a quasi full-time gig that you're doing for no pay. Does it fill like some sort of need inside?
This may go to a little bit of the recovery side, but part of me felt a responsibility after I made changes in my life, and I kind of glanced over that, like I made changes, but it was a substantial thing for me. Like that was, I come from a long line of people that used, again, my scenario where they used alcohol.
Yeah.
I come from a long, this is generation. So I was given a blueprint on how you live your life. And going back to, one of the reasons I wanted to make a change is I felt like I was passing on that same blueprint on to my kids. So
that blueprint being like Miller Lite.
Adulting meant you went to work, you came home, you drank, hung out with the family, and then you drank whether it was a celebration, whether it was something to mourn, whether it was a Tuesday, whatever
breakfast.
It was. Right. And that's how I thought you adulted, and I hung out with other people adulted the same way, because when you do that, you don't question what you're doing if everyone around you is doing the same thing, right? So we surround ourselves with people doing a lot of the same things. So I felt a bit of a responsibility, like, hey, man, my life's got so much better. Let me just throw it out there. I'm going to tell my story, and whatever happens from that happens. That grew into a platform for other people to tell their story, not just about alcohol, because, I think habits, they transcend just, alcohol. We all pick whatever our poisons are on the negative side. There's a million of them. And so I started talking about that, and then just kind of grew. And I said, well, how can we do something more? And that's when it became the nonprofit. The answer, does it fill? It does fill something. And it's almost even with entrepreneurs or comedy, there's a feeling of building something from nothing, right? that again, it's one of the proudest things I mean, I'm so insanely proud of not just, you know, what that sparked, not just in myself, but now we have 21 ambassadors across the country. We've got an amazing board member. We've brought on Athletic Brewing as one of our, as well as the Patriot Fund. Like we're supported by amazing organizations. And then every time I'm about to say like, God, this thing it's become a hassle.
Yeah.
I'll get a message from somebody, even if I'm just the middleman, saying, "Hey, I heard your conversation with, you know, whoever, and it really touched me. Can you put me in contact with them?" And I've been like privy to the emails and some messaging, and I'm like, that's why.
You've had some pretty amazing guests. I don't mean just from a name brand. You've had Chef Robert Irvine and I forget who's the cyclist. Not
Greg LeMond.
Greg LeMond. But you've had other really cool guests on. You forgive me, I forget the name of the Army general.
Yeah.
Who came out and talked about being bipolar.
Yeah.
And
sure.
how he what's his name?
General Greg Martin.
Greg Martin. That's right. You talked about. You said, you know, Greg and I are now friends, and you said, and through the course of him telling his story about how he was managing troops, hundreds, thousands of troops, and he's bipolar, and he's like, "Hey, you guys are doing a great job. You're fucking assholes. Also, you're doing a great job. Also, get back to work." He elaborated on this, and I've seen his social media increase, not necessarily just because of coming on with you, but I think you've had some. Is there any one guest or one experience you've had that kind of jumps out of your mind, like, man, this was transformative for me?
Yeah. Well, there's been a couple. And a lot of times that changes, but just, you know, in how recent it was, even the conversations.
Sure.
I mean, I had one last week that it went out today. It was I really enjoy talking to people. So I look at habits as a spectrum, right? You've got good, you've got bad.
Yeah.
And I've had people that have lived on two opposite ends on that. And those are the people that fascinate me, right? Because they're the ones that really understand the consequences and the ramifications of that. So if you're just hooked on your phone, or you watch too much Netflix, sure, your life, you could be doing something maybe a little better, but the consequences aren't that steep. I just talked to a woman named Ashley Petruno, and Ashley, Air Force veteran, an athlete. She's got her degree in behavioral health. If you looked at her now, we would think that this person's got it all together. And at times she was hooked on heroin. Like she started off with pain pills, and that you know, we've heard that story a lot of different times, and those are the consequences to habits. We don't always see them coming. You know, you go from coming out of the Air Force, getting your degree, fast forward a couple of years, and your life looks way, way different. And then to come back to that. And I think all these conversations have made me way more empathetic towards other people when I looked at the reasons I did the things I did. And then you realize how things could have gone way worse for a lot of people. And you see the human experience and why people do things, where I used to be a little more, I still can be, but a little less judgmental.
Yeah. Less cynical, maybe.
Yeah. And you realize, man, we're like, there's just a lot of people out there kind of suffering one way or the other. And
you never know what demons somebody's dealing with. Right?
You don't.
And I know your story. Like, I know that when today you got, you have a successful nonprofit that you're running. You're pretty well known in the podcast circles, and you have a great 9-to-5, and you've had a great career, and you have kids in college and in high school, and you have 2.4 dogs, and like you have a really, on paper, you look like you have it together. But because I know your story, I know that there were some low points, and the irony of you talking about Ashley coming out of the Air Force isn't lost on me, because that was your journey too. It's coming out of the Air Force, and I think you were homeless for a bit.
I was. Well, I mean, I wasn't living on the street homeless, but I didn't have a place to really. I was just sleeping on people's couches. So I love telling this story.
Yeah, that makes you homeless. I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's not. Put tiles.
No.
So, and this ties into the consequence of habit, because one of the habits I like talking about is surrounding yourself by the right people, because you will become what you surround yourself by. And I got out of the military and I surrounded myself with the wrong people. And
In what way? Like just people who had no vision, just
no,
degenerates.
Not all of them. As a matter of fact, Ernie, if you're listening, he's one of the guys that actually let me. I still owe him $300 for crashing at his place. But yes, I surround myself by some people that were not heading in the right direction, and I didn't realize. Sometimes we don't realize in real time where we are in our life. And I came home for
That's deep.
Yeah, I came home for a wedding, and I was around people that like actually loved me and they cared for me and they were doing good in life. And I had this epiphany. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing with myself? So I flew back to California. I sold everything I owned at a pawn shop, and you're not surprising. They really screwed me over. And
What?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm gonna have to go watch Pawn Stars tonight and see if that's true,
Yeah,
because they really seem to treat their people fair.
I sold my back seats to my Jeep. I sold them because I didn't know what to do with them, and everything I owned had to fit in a Wrangler.
Yeah, so I
So
didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
Like leave them there is not an option.
It's worth $4. So I sold everything and I loaded everything up, and to include my dog. And I started, which turned out to be a complete.
You are a homeless cliche, by the way.
I know.
I didn't have a home. I had a Jeep and a dog.
Dog.
You're literally a homeless cliche.
I just
I had a home. It was under the overpass
Yeah, right.
where I parked my Jeep.
smell like urine and broken dreams. So I drove.
Drove across country.
Which was supposed to be like this scenic thing, and I was going to stop and see the Grand Canyon. I got really sick, and I mean to the point where at one point I checked into a hotel. Now I didn't have enough money. I had enough money for like one night in the hotel.
Yeah.
And I ended up calling people to pay for a couple nights because I was so insanely sick. Then I was driving. I was somewhere. God, I must have been in Oklahoma. I was in Oklahoma.
It's about halfway.
I'm driving and I hear the top of my Jeep, and I'm just trying to feel better, and it's making a very strange noise, and with that it just rips off the top of the Jeep. So what I thought was going to be a scenic trip turned into.
What time of year was it?
Oh, it was in the winter. It was because I got home on the day before Christmas. I got home on the 23rd. Like 15 pounds lighter, a changed man.
Didn't you get pulled over by the cops?
I got pulled over by the Ohio State Police. What I didn't realize, because I didn't have a top on my Jeep, and then my North Face had pulled down, that he came up to the side of the car and he had his hand on his gun, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and he said, "Are you all right?" I go, "Yeah." What do you mean? He goes, "I've been behind you for 15 minutes. My lights and sirens on." But I didn't.
He's like, we got a report of a homeless guy
Yeah,
that sold his back seat
Degenerate that.
and lost the top of his Jeep. He's running from life.
Yeah, that it was. So yeah, his words of advice were, because I was right near the PA line. He goes, "Get out of Ohio." That was it. So yeah, that was. So everyone who's going to transition out of the military, have a plan. Before you know it, you'll be framing houses and laying ceramic tile for $5 an hour.
That transition on the military story, that's a conversation for another time. I would love to get multiple veterans on here and tell their phenomenal stories about, because everybody has this vision of when you're in the military about getting out, about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I was a wedding DJ.
I remember that.
Yeah, I went from, I think I've told you that story. I left the SEAL teams where I thought I was going in to be like, if Rambo and James Bond had a baby, that would be me. And I got there, and this is pre 9/11, and I was like, it's not really what I thought it was going to be, and it was okay. But I got out, and I was like, well, I know how to parachute. I know how to scuba dive. I'm going to take this skill set and go somewhere that somebody could use a scuba diving parachutist.
Sure.
And spoiler alert, kids, there aren't a lot of job opportunities out there for that kind of skill set. And I didn't know how to translate my leadership skills or my work ethic into things that I could articulate in a job interview. And I was doing karaoke one night. True story. Doing karaoke one night, and a gal comes up to me and she's like, "Hey, you got some chutzpah, you got some personality on the mic. Would you like to be a wedding DJ?" And I'm 24, 25 years old, and I said, "Yeah, sure." Like, she's like, "It pays like hundreds of dollars a night. You know, you only work 2 nights or 2 days a week, wedding DJ." And I'm like, "I like parties. I like having fun.
Yeah,
I like
fun.
drinking beer. I like meeting bridesmaids. This sounds awesome." And I never forget, I went to, and there's a lesson in humility here as well. I went to my first wedding, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is cool." And it was like my 7th or 8th wedding that I was doing, and I'll never forget. Like, some kid came up to me. He's like, "Hey, Mister," he's like, "Are you a Navy SEAL? I heard you're a Navy SEAL." And totally true. I had to be like, "Hey, hold on a sec, bud. All right, let's get on the floor for the chicken dance. Who's ready for the chicken dance? All right." I was like, yes, I am a Navy SEAL. And I remember going, crawling under the table and sobbing uncontrollably for 10, 15 minutes while the chicken dance just played on repeat. But I remember thinking, like, how the hell did I get here? One, but also a lesson in humility. There was a lesson in humility, but
I thought I was going to get some really cool job. And like I said, next thing I know, it was framing houses or laying tile. So,
not there's anything wrong with it.
nah, listen, there's
When you went from guarding nukes, you thought,
yeah, I just discounted my experience in the military and thought, I was too cool for school, and I was wrong. So it was
I was just cool enough to frame houses.
yeah. So.
All right, dude, where can folks find you on the interweb?
You can check us out at consequenceofhabit.org or any of the major podcast platforms, Consequence of Habit.
All right, dude, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate you. It's a great story.
All right, man.
Good luck to you, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it.